Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest in the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today I have Nicholas Alter on the line. He's founder of Founder's Best Friend. Nick, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, Nick, so I know you were referred over to us from David Holman, so we sure do appreciate that. I know he always brings us great interviews, and today we're going to talk about really modeling for growth. And I guess just to get us kicked off here, tell us a little bit more about Founder's Best Friend.
Yeah, so Founder's Best Friend is a response to what we built with, there's a company that actually precedes Founder's Best Friend called ThriveSide. And what we did is that we built a maturity modeling system, proprietary framework around how do we actually approach market, how do we go to market, how are we at market, and how do we win our position at market, and how do we define those stages or positions at market. And so anyways, we spent about 3 years building that and really vetting it out, validating the whole process and framework and everything that we were doing there, making sure that it really did work. And then, but the end goal, the intention was always to build a coaching platform where we can actively take businesses meet them where they're at and guide them through, coach them along the way, the journey of how do we graduate from this position at market to this position to ultimately where the majority of us really want to go or need to get to, which is sustainability. Everybody thinks it's scale. It's not scale. It's sustainability. Yeah. And so ultimately, how do we get to sustainability? And then once we're there, how do we then go forward from there? How do we actually, what decisions or what do we have in front of us? What questions do we need to ask? And in order for us to say, this is what we want, so to speak.
Yeah. Let's take a step back, just one step back before we go further, because I want to make sure that our audience is up to speed on this. So give me the definition of maturity modeling, like what that means to you.
Sure. So the idea of maturity modeling is that it's a sequence. It's like how we approach raising kids. It's the idea of kindergarten through 12th grade through college, right? It's the idea of what is level one and, in gaming technologies, or if we're talking like, for the football nerds, it's how do we go from Pop Warner to the NFL? Yeah. And it's funny that and so everybody's like, well, that just sounds like an esoteric and kind of jumped up way of describing what that is. But the reality is that the idea of maturity modeling is that if we actually have a model, a framework by which that we can say, no, this is, I don't care what kind of building you're building. It doesn't matter if it's a skyscraper or if it's a house, there's always going to be fundamental, steps that we have to address in a particular order in order for us to get there. Now, the details might be different in between, but, ultimately we always are going to start with what's the purpose of the structure? And then, move into things like site planning and getting into, architectural design and, et cetera, right? Mm-hmm. And yet we tend to forget that is ultimately what we're always doing. So maturity modeling.
Yeah, no, I get this. And what's interesting to me is that there's different levels, right? Different stages of this, and people and a company in the case of what we're talking about today, and maybe even marketing, it can be, they're going to be in different stages. So whether it's, startup, just getting started up, whether they're, in the beginning stages, still in the idea, no product, whether they're still dreaming it up, or whether they're already further along and they already have, they're in the market, they have a certain amount of traction, and now, like you mentioned earlier, sustainability. They're trying to figure out how to sustain and how to grow over time. Am I understanding this right in terms of the concept? I just want to make sure I'm painting that picture correctly.
Yes, correct.
Awesome. So let's go a little bit further here. So in terms of your expertise and you working with companies, are you working with companies on all different areas of the spectrum, or what's the specialty, whether it's stage or niche or industry? Let's get in the weeds a little bit.
Yeah, sure. No, I have a pretty bizarre career background in terms of
I like bizarre. That, come on, give it to me, Nick. That's where it starts to get good here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, is it Joel Trammell that put it best? He goes, Nick, you're unemployable, so you better go build something. And it's just very true. I love that man. He's brutally honest. Actually, his platform is really, really cool. You should interview him at some point. Anyways, but the idea was, this is that when I went to college, I went to school for publishing. That was my intent. And, I graduated right around when the publishing industry collapsed, imploded the way that we knew it then. And so I didn't really have
so you have good
a
timing.
lot of,
I got the first part of your journey. You have good timing. Go ahead.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing timing. And so anyways, I was like, all right, what am I going to do? I got a lot of student debt. How am I going to make money here? And at the time, marrying my high school sweetheart, my wife was like, dude, you got to make money. I'm like, yeah, okay, figure it out. And so we got to the point where I was like, all right, so I loved telling stories, and I loved the story concept and, aspect of things. And I realized, and again, really marketing wasn't initially my plan. But as I was digging into it and realizing that, I could be telling stories in this environment and get paid to do it, that's where I started leaning in. And it just so happened that social media was a new burgeoning side of the equation. And so I was like, okay, great. I'll just go after that then. Why not? And so then what that turned into is that I was, 22, 23 at the time. And suddenly I'm working for really big companies. And I had, I was a consultant. I could say that I was a consultant, which basically, again, means that nobody was willing to actually employ me full time. But, I was a consultant for groups like, big hospital organizations like St. David's. And then I wound up working with CCIM, which is one of the largest commercial real estate organizations in the world. And it just had this, and I was working for Jeff Henson, he was the CFO of Univision when they went IPO. And then he started his company. And so I just had these really bizarre experiences that I just kept getting knocked into. And so I was working for big established brands, but then I was also on the flip side, I was like, no, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was an idiot. And I was like, I'm going to go work with startups. That sounds fantastic and exciting. and in reality, that's just, you're a masochist if you just want to keep getting into that over and over again. So I wound up, it's just apparently, and it hurts so good. But, and the thing was, is just that I was working with groups I worked with a group called Square Cow Movers. And at the time they had 3 employees, which is the owners, and they had 2 trucks. And within 7 years, though, that was a rocket ship. We took them from basically, less than $1 million all the way through to they were, doing 8 figures. And wow. Just really crushing it. And they were, they had hundreds of employees. And it was just this, and the thing was, they were one. We had several of those in a bunch of different industries. I was working in construction. I was working and the thing is, I'm too ADHD to really settle in on any one thing. And the thing is, I just love the challenge. I just loved I liked fixing broken stuff. And I liked being the solutions guy to all the things. And again, I don't sit still long enough for any of this to be like, oh, you know what? I'm going to go after it. The smart play always was to be like, hey, let's go into this one industry, this one vertical, and let's go crush it. And let's just go be the dominating force in this arena. And I'm like, no, let's blow it up every time and see if we can do it all over again. And so that's what I did. And so with, and here we are, 15 plus years later, and we're, over 1,000 companies behind me in that regard, many of which, have been really successful and many of which have not. And so, and along the way, learned a lot around, it was like, okay, why do we hate marketing so much? Because at that point, I hated it too, right? I really didn't like it. And I was getting burnt out. I built a really cool agency and called Alter Endeavors. And I had incredible people that I was working with there. And that agency still exists. But there came a point, and there's a whole God story behind how I wound up getting out of that company. But what I wound up doing is I wound up selling that business to my employees. And in that process was just that I wanted to answer the question, how do we fix marketing? How do we take control of marketing? How do we actually, because it's the one side of our business that we're always reacting to. We're never in a proactive state with the growth side of our business typically. It's always that, over time, the other sides of our business, whether it's, the fulfillment side or the sales side even, or the HR, name the other different aspects or, facets of a business. And over time, we always start reactionary at first, but over time, we know what actions we take will produce what results, right? And that's proactivity. And so because of that, we keep it inside the operational circle, the operational whole of the business. And yet we tend to see marketing over time especially the longer we're in it, the more that we hate it because we aren't in control of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, anyways,
How do you define,
really,
how do you define marketing? I want to like, let's set the
sure,
stage there. Like, how do you define that? Because marketing is a broad term. Like, how do you
right. Yeah, and I think that's actually the problem, right? The problem is that, like, if you were to go ask 100 people and say,
Yeah.
what is marketing to you, and you ask them to define marketing, you're going to get 100 different answers. I guarantee you could probably go down, all the episodes you've done so far that you've produced and people that talk about marketing. It's like their perspective on it is going to be dramatically different. And the other thing is that typically marketing is defined as an activity rather than as a result.
Mm.
And so the majority of business and the rest of the other sides of our business, we don't do that. We typically define the other sides of our business in context to the outcome, right?
Yeah.
And so I look at marketing. My definition is the actions we take to win our position at market.
Mm-hmm.
And so, people can argue with me, and I'm like, fine, you can call that something else if you want. I'm going to call that marketing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because it's the driving force behind growth.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think organizations are really looking for? Like at the end of the day, what do you think they're looking for?
Outcome.
Mm-hmm.
ROI. Actually, if I were to take it all the way back, the first question I always ask anybody in the very beginning of whatever it is that they're building, they're trying to get out there into the world, is, what do you want?
Yeah.
I don't ask the why. I never ask the why question first. I always ask the what do you want question first, right?
Yeah.
It's saying, hey, really, what do you want out of this? Where do you want this to go? What do you really want this to become? And so, and more often than not, they struggle to answer that because they're just like, I'm just doing this. Oftentimes they're just doing it out of necessity, or they're doing it because they got excited about something, or like, oh, I think we can do this. But I'm like, yeah, but where do you really want this to wind up?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that the definition that I have, it sounds underwhelming when I first say it, but it's super easy to remember, right? The actions we take to win our position at market. The trick is, what position at market are you currently in?
Mm-hmm.
What do you need to graduate from? What do you need to win? And we always, because ultimately when we talk about, building a business, and there's so many good books out there that talk about the different aspects and components of business, but they never talk about in what order those things really should be happening.
You mentioned before, you've worked with a lot of companies, some that have done, extremely well, some that, have not gone down in history as big winners, we'll say. What do you find for the losers, let's call it, not as people, but I just mean in the business it lost? What do you find a lot of times holds people back, like from winning or from succeeding? Because you've been inside a lot of companies.
Oh man, and there's a laundry list that we can go down, right? One of the biggest killers is always going to be ego. And oftentimes, or it's going to be a scarcity mindset over an abundance mindset. It's going to be a lack of commitment and consistency. There's a laundry list. And oftentimes it's not just the one thing.
For sure.
Right? Mm-hmm. And then the thing is that
if it was, by the way, we'd be able to solve that one thing and everybody would be fine, right? So I know it's not one thing for sure. It's a mixture.
That's right. That's right. It always is. But but when it comes to marketing, where everybody really struggles with growth, it's just that oftentimes they'll try one thing, they'll try another thing, and they're like, that didn't work, and that didn't work, and so therefore I don't believe in this. I'm done with it. I feel like this is I feel like this is a sham. I feel like this is some kind of Ponzi scheme. Why am I doing this? And so they think, and so therefore when we fail at something, how many times do we fail at it before we say, all right, I'm done with this and I'm not doing this anymore? There's those that now the people that continue forward, like it's like me with golf, right? I'm terrible at golf. I've always been bad at golf, and yet I still play the game. I don't know why. I don't know why I keep playing this game.
I know
every
why,
time I go out there,
that one hit, you get one good shot every time, and it's the sport that giveth and taketh. You get that one good shot. I always wish, I'm like, man, Nick, I hope I don't hit a single good shot the whole time I'm out there, because then I'm done with this game. And I always get one, and I'm like, dang it, why'd you get one?
That's right. And by the way, I don't say dang it. Like there's a string of expletives that come out because I'm like, I got that shot. And I'm just like, well, I guess there goes another, however many dollars next month towards that membership because and however many hours, because my wife's like, she's like, you hate this. And I'm like, no, I love this and I hate myself sometimes.
You're like, no, I hate
weird.
this. I do. I love it. I hate it. I love it.
That's right. I'm really struggling.
By the way, funny quick story. I got a sidebar quickly. Our director of our podcast agency that runs the whole agency for us. I've known him since our 20s, like really good friend. He used to be a professional golfer for a while, and he was always my coach. And he gets mad whenever I bring up don't tell people that I coached you ever. No. Because he plays really good. So whenever I have a chance to work it on the podcast, thanks to Matt for those lessons. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, buddy. Bless his heart. That's totally fair.
Circling back to the laundry list, because I like, and the reason why I asked you that question, by the way, and I like to kind of focus on the negative, not negative or the bad or whatever, however we want to say it, I don't care. But the main thing is, I feel like so often, the successes, right? The Elon Musk, the this, that, whatever. Maybe he's not a good example right now, but whoever we say is the successes, they get, there's this unrealistic expectation sometimes of what it takes to succeed or what it's like to do that. And I at times like to bring, when I have somebody like yourself on the line who has worked in many companies and, admittedly some have done really well, some not so well, to kind of elevate that part of it. So maybe by you sharing things like ego or things like that, if somebody out there is battling with some things, to understand that it's real, like some of these things, they're not the only ones that are maybe suffering for some of these challenges that have caused other businesses to fail, and that, everything's not necessarily going to be okay. You have to address problems and issues and not put your head under a rock, because your business can fail too. Right. So that's why I ask you those questions, just so you know some context.
Well, and I think that's totally fair. By the way, there's sometimes it's that purely we're in the wrong game too, right? Yeah. Sometimes it is. It's just that
sometimes we're in a losing point. Sometimes they're supposed to.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. It's like, hey, this market ain't there anymore, or this was never meant to be that. I mean, This is not where people are in the first place, which goes back to
wrong idea, wrong thought,
right, which
whatever.
Actually goes back to right.
Right. It's almost a miracle.
Right.
If you really look at it, it's almost a miracle anything succeeds if you really think about it. Like time period and everything else, like it's a lot stacked up against entrepreneurs to make it happen. So that's why I have so much respect when somebody gets traction on an idea, because I know how hard that is.
Right. No, 1,000%. But that said, I do actually believe that there is a way I think there is an approach that is much more controlled. I do think that there is a methodology that
not luck.
That if we
doesn't have to be luck.
Yeah, right. It doesn't need to be. And the thing is that we can prove that because there are people. I mean, there are plenty of entrepreneurs that have made it, that have been very, very successful, and it was just the one thing that they did. And frankly, it was like winning the lottery, and they just, I mean, no offense to anybody that has done that, but I mean, the reality is like if they just drunk stumbled into it, right? Versus, it's like, no, we fundamentally understand. And I mean, there are people like, I think of like Alex Hormozi, or I think of Sharon Serviza, or I think of, I could go down the list. I think of Aaron Stokes, and these guys that they can just, it seems like, man, whatever they touch turns to gold. No, because they understand methodically what it is that they need to do, and they know how to evaluate the opportunity in the first place. They know how to actually frame up, the existential piece, and then move into the discovery piece, and then move into the adoption piece. And they can do that, and it's, you think about big businesses that tend to do that really, really well, and which not every big business does, by the way, right? And we see that. So anyways, that's just, sorry, I'll get that.
Well, Nick,
that's the way I look at it too.
Nick, this has been a ton of fun having you on the show. I really enjoyed it, but I do want to give you the opportunity. If somebody's listening to this and they want to connect and learn more about Founder's Best Friend or connect with you and your team, how do they do that?
Sure. You can either go to the website, which is just foundersbestfriend.com, or heck, anybody that's listening here, if you ever just want to have a conversation, it's just nick@thriveside.com, which actually lends itself to my LinkedIn rule. Like, I don't connect with anybody on LinkedIn unless we've had at least a 30-minute conversation. So just reach out to me, nick@thriveside.com, and let's, we can have a conversation. Love it.
Amazing. And for everybody listening, we'll definitely put at least the LinkedIn link in the show notes so that you can just click on it and connect and shoot Nick a message over there. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. We have daily guests each and every day. We're putting out new content, bringing out amazing guests like Nick and others. We don't want you to miss a thing. So hit that subscribe button. And if you're an old time listener, you've been with us for a while and haven't pitched in and done your part yet and left us a review, man, get that done. Get that review done already. We're supporting entrepreneurs out there. We're entrepreneurs. Leave us that review. We really do appreciate it. And Nick, again, so much fun having you on. And David, if you listen to this one, thanks so much for introducing Nick to us.
Yeah, loved it. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate the time. This was fun.